I'm Sian.
I'm Laura.
And I'm Alice.
We're a theatre company of three, telling stories around the whole country. But now we're stuck at home with just a microphone. Welcome to Stories from the...
Wait. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. Blackmail, earthquakes on the Richter scale, farmland, one-man band, chickens getting out of hand, vintage cars, rock stars, cider at the bar, cake mix, politics, stories from the sticks.
Welcome to Stories from the Sticks, brought to you by Scratchworks Theatre Company. Whilst we can't be on the road, we're bringing stories from the road to you. Episode 3, Sidney and Tony.
Hello! So, episode 3.
Episode 3. Lucky number 3.
Woohoo!
Woo. How you guys doing?
Good. Bit of a cloudy day.
Yeah.
The clouds of lockdown.
But I've got another tea and I'm not sweaty, so for me,
Good.
this is a plus.
Sweaty tea.
You're wearing a jumper today.
I am.
You couldn't be any less sweaty.
I've got peppermint tea, a jumper. I'm loving life.
Nice.
Living the super podcast life.
And a lockdown dream.
So what are we rambling about today, guys?
We decided that our pre-ramble is going to be a dedication to the animals of rural touring.
We've just met so many of them, and they've all been so amazing. Across the years, we've had dogs, cats, amphibians, reptiles. There's been
Birds.
some birds.
Oh yeah, birds.
Farm animals, probably. But one of the days that will always be really memorable for me is when we went to Wells. We performed at lovely Wells Festival. And
The smallest city in England.
yes, with a very big cathedral.
And lots of talk of Hot Fuzz.
Hot Fuzz.
Oh, yeah, the
You
Hot
could
Fuzz
take the Hot
town.
Fuzz tour. Yeah. Iconic. But as we were there, what was her name who put us up? Was her name Claire?
Pass.
I want to
All
say
right,
Joe.
don't include that bit. The
Cut,
lovely
Andy,
woman. And when we were there, our host for the day was a puppy breeder. I'm not lying. She had, I think, 7 cockapoo puppies in her house. So many little fluffy golden puppies. And she was like, oh, well, you could just have a wander around Wells, or we do have 7 puppies if you want to go play with them at our house. And we were like, well, we know exactly where we're going right now.
We didn't get off the floor for ages.
No. And that's what we did. We went and bathed in puppies. Oh, that sounds dark. No, we didn't.
Oh, that sounds really grim. We didn't bathe in puppies.
We didn't bathe in the puppies. We played with the puppies. Even Alice.
Puppy
who isn't-
pile-up.
It was a puppy.
Oh yeah, there's a really funny picture where I'd just been handed a puppy and I'm kind of holding it awkwardly, like, what do I do?
But you
I'm
did
not the
it.
biggest animal lover for the listeners out there.
I feel like we're easing it out of you. In like 5 years' time, you're going to be like Dr. Doolittle.
As long as it's not a hairless
Yeah.
cat, we're fine.
Oh my god, no hairless cats.
And there was that time with the kitchen full of cats, which was
That
delightful
was
for us.
absolutely terrifying. That was in Salisbury.
I was in
I was
Salisbury.
terrified. There were about 8 cats sitting on the kitchen counter of this dark kitchen, and as I turned on the light, they were all staring at me. It was like something out of a horror movie.
Alice, we were in our bedroom, and Alice came upstairs and was like, "Can you guys come downstairs to the kitchen? There are loads of cats."
What about the sausage dogs? What's their real name?
Oh, Dashens.
Dashens in Sixpenny Handley.
I was trying to think of their names and I
what
couldn't
were they
remember
called?
them.
They were so good. They brought them in especially because we were like, "Oh my gosh, dogs!"
She drove down with them when we were mid
She
rehearsal.
brought them.
And brought them in, and then
Oh,
we had a
so
little cuddle
cute.
at the house, and then I had a little panic because I thought one of them had eaten
Eating the chocolate digestives.
chocolate digestives,
Yeah.
and I had a real little panic about it, and was like, dogs don't eat chocolate. It'd been really sneaky and sneaked into one of the girls' bags, but he was fine. He
was
wanted
all right.
belly rubs. Oh, So if there's any rural touring venues out there who'd like to put us up and happen to have dogs, I can be a performer and also a very good dog sitter.
We also had baby like turtles when we were in Dorset.
What?
Sean, you and I. We stayed with the little baby turtles. It was literally like our last show before lockdown. There was a dog, and they had this like tank and they were like, "Oh, do you want to hold the turtles?" And we're like, "Yes, we do."
That must have been Corfe Castle.
I think it was. It was Corfe Castle.
Yeah, it was Corfe Castle. And it had these two, and it's because the full-grown turtles were just out chilling in the shed. That's where they hibernated. Yeah. They had these little baby ones just in the
little heater next to it. Yeah. Oh, they were so cute.
We got to hold them and.
So, who's up today?
It's me, Sean.
And what are you doing, Sean? Who are you chatting to?
I have been chatting to Sidney and Tony from Malmesbury. Hello. You're listening to the sweet tones of Sean this week. Today we take a historical walk through the town of Malmesbury in Wiltshire, a place that seems to have more stories than a Brothers Grimm fairy tale book, where we meet fellow theatre maker and very enthusiastic Malmesbury local, Sidney, who grew up, moved away, and then came right back again. We've never actually been to Malmesbury, but I've come very close, touring to the Pound Art Centre in Corsham, which is only a few miles away. They kindly put us in touch with Sidney through her work at the community radio station and their youth theatre. Although we haven't been to Malmesbury, since chatting to Sidney and local historian Tony, who you'll meet later on in this episode, they paint a pretty clear picture, full of light, bubbly personalities, honest interactions, and vibrant stories that sit on the blurred line between fanciful hearsay and history. Essentially, Malmesbury, if you're listening, and if you'll have us, we'll be there as soon as we can tour again. But right now, here's Sidney.
So, first of all, Sidney, could you just describe for our listeners where you are? Just give them a picture of where you are right now.
Yeah. So I'm in my kitchen in my house, and the house is on the lower high street of the town, and it's called the Doll's House. And I would say it's officially the smallest house in Malmesbury, which is why it's called the Doll's House. And it's a great size for me, being about 5'5", but Tristan's about 6 foot tall, so he has to bend over all the time. So I'm in the kitchen. I'm looking at a wall. I don't have a great view, but to my left is the window looking out onto the garden, and then the garden goes down to a little stream. So that's a very nice view. And if I was sensible, I'd put the table there looking out onto the garden rather than at the wall.
Have you been able to do you do much gardening, or has that kind of just been...
So this is being honest, I am not very good at gardening because I don't like slugs, toads, worms and snails. So gardening is quite challenging for me. But my mum normally does the gardening here, which is a bit embarrassing to tell everyone, but she does, and she's made it really pretty, the garden. So while she hasn't been coming over to do any gardening, obviously. So we've been doing the gardening under strict instructions, and I've gotten a bit better at doing it through a silly way of doing things, which is doing 10 digs without looking with a spade, and then doing what you need to do, and then putting the plant in, closing your eyes. Don't look if you've chopped a worm in half. Don't look if there are any centipedes.
Is it you just really squirmish with them?
Yeah, really squirmish.
Oh God, yeah. Then that's difficult, especially if there's been lots of rain and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So does your mum live nearby then? Is she in the same town as you?
Exactly. My parents live about, well, depending on how fast you walk, 5 or 7 minutes walk away.
Oh, brilliant.
At the other side of town, which is really nice. So we see them, well, we usually see them every couple of days, and then we've been doing shopping for them during the lockdown and stuff. But they've just started going out a little bit. They got a letter that they were allowed to go out as long as they social distanced. But for a while,
were they originally under the, if you don't mind me asking, were they originally under the kind of high risk
Yeah, exactly. My dad has mild asthma, so he got a letter saying don't go out at all. And then a couple of weeks ago, got one saying you can go out as long as you're super careful. But then, which has been nice because now they're going on like little bike rides and walks and things.
Oh, nice.
And it's my birthday in a couple of weeks' time, and we were trying to think, could we have a picnic? I think picnics are allowed now. We could have a picnic in one or other of our gardens, but we didn't know whether you're allowed to have food or whether it's sensible to have food prepared by other people, or if it's better just to have food prepared for yourself. Yeah, if you don't lick the spoon if you're making a cake or something like that. Yeah.
No double dipping in the
yeah
dip, like that.
Yeah, exactly.
How did you start the community radio, and how did it all begin?
The idea came from Dan because he used to do community radio when he was at college, and then in the classic way of councils, current councils, well, potentially austerity councils, they might be referred to now, they said, all right, we're going to cut the radio budget for the college and we need somewhere to store all this kit. And his teacher said, listen, they're going to put the kit in a black hole cupboard. No one's going to see this radio kit again. Why don't you take it, Dan? You really enjoy doing the radio. Have it. So that was super nice of the teacher. So a few years after Dan had sort of inherited it from Wiltshire College, we got the kit. We said to everyone, right, we're going to do community radio in Malmesbury in conjunction with Malmesbury Carnival, which happens in August. It will be really fun. We'll chat to people like, are you having jam or cream first? All silly things like, what are you dressed up as in the procession? Are you feeling sick after your ride? Try and publicise the events that happen in the town. Like, I don't know, there might be a band or something, chat to the band and broadcast their music. So we said to everyone, we told everyone, we're going to do it, it's going to happen. But then we came to set up the equipment and none of the equipment worked at all. The sound desk was from 1992. So it was really stressful. We didn't know that we'd said to everyone we were going to do it, none of the kit worked. So then we had this like mad scramble for kit and borrowed it from people, and we got the radio working, and that was probably in 2017. And then we've been doing it once or twice a year for short duration periods since then.
Is it something that you think you'd like to carry on doing after lockdown? Like keep it going as a regular thing? Or do you think, because it sounds like it takes up a lot of your time as well.
Yeah, it takes up a huge amount of time. So I think it feels like it uses up my generosity. I didn't realise generosity had a sort of finite line, but I feel like the radio uses it up to that line. And you're sort of operating at maximum capacity all the time. It's a huge, beautiful community project. We've done a couple of radio workshops with young people, and that's been really fun, like setting up so you can make your own DJ set that then gets played out and you can listen to it at home.
Oh, great.
So really fun and jolly. So I'd like to do those with it, and I'd love to do it in an empty shop, and maybe there's going to be plenty of those in the high street in the future. So I'd love to do like a take over a shop front and be really visible with it, and have people come in and say like, oh, what do you got in your shop? So they got a discount and co-op, right? Everyone get your tomatoes. That kind of silly visibleness I think would be really fun. But I think probably the thing that I enjoy most is having an excuse to contact lots of people, and really I think that's what it is. It's like it really doesn't matter what goes on the radio. It's really the process of being in contact with lots of other people and together making something. I think that's the thing that I like most. And I should confess that I really love Malmesbury. And I'd really love to figure out...
It could have been a worse confession there. So.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of embarrassing because it's not very trendy to love where you grew up. Like most people are, oh yeah, isn't it? Getting out of there. And I love it. And every day I lived away from Malmesbury for 12 years, which I thought was I'm pretty proud that I managed to do it. But every day I was homesick. So it's just, I'm so glad that we've moved back and that we live here now. A real pleasure that it means is when we are able to go on holiday or visit places again, I can go somewhere else, but know that I can come back is the nicest thing about it. And because we used to live in France and we lived in London, so all the holidays were taken coming home. And now it's a treat to be able to like, oh, we'll go somewhere else and then come back. It's really nice.
That's lovely. What is it that you love so much about Malmesbury?
I love lots of things. I love the community. That's for sure the best thing. I love that we know lots and lots of people in the town. I love that I know the older folks in the town, the people who are my generation, and then lots of the people who are my generation are having children, and we know all those people. And I love like the sparrow colony quality of the town, which could be nosiness, but in a way it's just sort of wanting to, like we were saying, stay in contact and like, oh, what's she doing? Oh no, she hasn't, has she yet? She's gone and got the only bin of tomatoes in Co-op. Oh no, never. Have you got any tomatoes? Yeah, I have. Here, do you want some tomatoes? That kind of thing. So I love the sort of low level of gossip that happens all the time. I love that my parents are here and friends from school are here. And I also love the history of the town. And I think the fact that everybody knows about this flying monk story really makes a shared narrative in the town. So you all know I come from the town of the flying monk.
You've said it now, so can you please tell us about the flying monk?
Okay. So I was thinking I'm probably going to be a propagator of untrue history. So apologies for that. But at some point in the past, it could have been the 8th century or the 9th century or the 10th century or the 11th century, there was a man called Elmer who was a monk. He was a monk in the Abbey of Malmesbury. Elmer, for some reason, thought he wanted to fly. And as far as I understand, that was probably quite a radical thing to think at the time, because flying was the domain of the birds and God was in the heavens. And you shouldn't go as a human up into God's territory. But I think at the time, it was a point when there were lots of invasions from Denmark coming into England from the east. So it was a time of chaos. And maybe there wasn't that much control over what was going on in the monks in the abbey. So he got permission from the chief monk, I don't know what his name was, to make his outfit and to try and fly. And he made himself a structure of wings. And actually, there's a drawing, I think, by Leonardo da Vinci of Elmer with wings. And he had, so as if you were putting out your arms and you built like a trellis structure under your arms with canvas strapped to it. And then he jumped from the top of the tower in Malmesbury. And Malmesbury used to have the highest tower in all of England. It was taller than Salisbury Cathedral, though, the tower. So he jumped off that and he flew for a couple of miles down to the bottom of the hill. Maybe it was a mile, or maybe it was a furlong. It was a furlong, I think. He flew a furlong and then he crash landed. And he thought it was pretty good. He was pretty pleased with that. He got quite far. And he thought the problem was he didn't have a tail. And we've been watching baby blackbirds in our garden recently, and they're really slow and really ungainly. And I realised they don't have tails. The mummy and daddy blackbirds do have tails, but the babies don't. So, I mean, maybe he was right. Maybe he really needed a tail, because on a plane, you talk about tail lift. So I think it might really help with the aerodynamics.
Yeah, the keeping you afloat, I suppose, keeping you up.
Yeah. So then he built a second set. He had a second go with the tail this time. He jumped off a second time, but this time he crash landed and he broke both his legs. And that was kind of the end of his flying career.
But he survived it.
I think he survived it, but I imagine that if you broke both your legs potentially at that time, you might not have been able to stay around for very long.
Yeah. That's incredible, though. I love the kind of the gumption of he does it once and goes, that was all right, I can do it better.
Yeah, that's right.
Sidney then told me I should probably check the facts with Malmesbury's local historian, Tony McAlevey. So I did.
Elmer the Flying Monk.
Yep.
He sounded like a character.
Yeah, amazing.
I'd love to hear kind of your account of what you know about his story.
Elmer is sometimes seen as a bit of a joke. Elmer the Flying Monk sounds like, like a circus act. And sometimes dismissed as a legend. Who was this flying monk? Surely that's not possible. But actually, it appears to be true that at the beginning of the 11th century, a monk of Malmesbury constructed some sort of hang glider and threw himself off a tower of the abbey and flew for a while before he landed and broke his legs. And the reason we know this story is because William of Malmesbury, famous historian, tells the story in his History of the Kings of England. And he's actually telling the story of the Battle of Hastings in 1066. And he just mentions this as a sort of little footnote, this tale of Elmer. It seems believable because William was a monk in Malmesbury Abbey, and he joined in the 1090s. And he's writing about a monk who seems to have been around and perhaps died in the 1060s. So William will have known older men who knew Elmer. And William was a serious historian. I mean, he didn't just tell stories. I mean, he did tell some quite interesting stories, but he was very serious as a historian. So there's no reason to think it's not true.
Sidney had mentioned that he flew twice, or is that something you can't confirm?
No, I don't think we know this. The account of William of Malmesbury just has him flying once. He must have practiced.
You would hope so.
And I think one of the things that intrigues me is why he was permitted to do this crazy thing, because we've got the books of rules for the monks of the period, and they're incredibly strict. You know, their day is mapped out, and they're supposed to spend most of their time either, in church, in the services, or in the cloister doing their intellectual work. They're not supposed to be making hang gliders and jumping off towers. So that interests me, but I think I can only find an account of one flight. My own theory as to why he was permitted to do it is that actually when he did it, which must have been around the year 1010, around about then, there was chaos because the Vikings had come back and were around here, actually, and there was a sort of breakdown of order. And in the middle of the chaos, I love this idea of Elmer thinking, right, this is my chance to indulge in my little project and have a go at making a hang glider. So that's my theory. But no, he only, according to William, did this once, and then he broke his legs. William says that he reflected that he got the design wrong, that he should have included some sort of tail, that the tail wasn't good enough, and that's why he perished.
Yeah, that's what Sidney mentioned about the tail. She said the second time round he tried it with a tail, and that's what he...
Oh, right, okay, no.
But it's really interesting to hear the history, factual bit, and then also how stories kind of developed when they're like passed around communities. That's really nice.
And there's a song, if you're interested, there's a song by a woman called Rosie Hood that Martin from the Pound showed me about Elmer, the flying monk. So if you're interested, I could send you it. Well, it's on Spotify, so I could just email you the name of the song, but it might be really nice.
No, that sounds perfect. That sounds really lovely.
Oh, the wind inspired my fall from grace. Too soon my wings they brought me low. Now altered always from my bid to live in Halley's glow. But the jackdaws mock me, join our chorus. Hands to wings fly among your own. And so I wrapped my arms in air 1,000 years ago.
That was Furlong of Flight by award-winning English folk singer Rosie Hood.
You'd also mentioned to me about the Tamworth 2. How old were you when that happened?
Well, I was trying to figure it out, and I think I was in secondary school. And the sort of thing I remember again about that, a bit like the sparrows talking about what they're eating and who's got tomatoes and stuff, was the gossip about it. I know the story from people telling it in retrospect, but I don't sort of have a memory of it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But I remember like, whoa, the pigs have escaped. It's happening here in Malmesbury. And then someone told us that Malmesbury was on the TV in Australia. And we were like, whoa. I mean, that's it. We're famous now in this town. That's it. They know about us in Australia. We've made it, guys.
Is it something that happened over, was it a short period of time, or was it a long pursuit of was it Butch and Sundance they were called?
Yeah, I think it was Butch and Sundance, and I think it was quite a long pursuit. So I think they escaped in sort of a couple of weeks into January, and then roamed around foraging up by what was Fylands, and now is the sort of Dyson has his big factory in the UK here. So that they were sort of foraging around out there for about a week, I think, in the gardens and in the bush around by Dyson's. And I think they were on their way to the slaughterhouse, is what I sort of remember, because there used to be a slaughterhouse in town, which I remember finding quite disgusting in the past. But now, in retrospect, I think it's probably really good to have a slaughterhouse in your town, because it happens, everything's really local, and the meat doesn't have to travel very far, and the animals don't have to travel far, and the farmers probably have a relationship with the abattoir owners, and it all sort of makes a bit more sense. But the abattoir used to be on the fields going out of town, and you could smell it. You could smell the abattoir in the town, and the street would run with blood. When they were doing the killing, they'd wash it out and it would run down into the gutters. And then they'd scatter, I guess it was sawdust on the blood to sort of soak it up, which is probably the same as like bread pudding, really, blood and sawdust.
Sounds a bit, the streets running with blood sounds a bit biblical, doesn't it?
Yeah,
There's something quite biblical about it.
And then 2 pigs escaped from the back of their truck. But that's what did happen. The 2 pigs were on the way to the slaughterhouse, and they jumped out of the truck. And then rumour has it that they swam across the River Avon into the fields and into other people's gardens. It was like they knew it was the end for them. So they were, I think they were brother and sister as well. I don't know if that's true. I think they were brother and sister. I think Butch was the lady pig and Sundance was the man pig. So they escaped, and it's quite a long journey. It's probably about a mile from where the abattoir was to Dyson's, up the hill. So they made a good journey past the primary school, past the tennis courts, past the new housing estate, through Dyson's sort of high security complex, crossed the road and into another housing estate, which is where they hung out for a week. And I think what we heard was that there were hundreds of journalists, is what everyone was saying. Hundreds of journalists. I don't know if that's true, because I never saw any journalists hiding in the bushes and in people's gardens trying to spy on the pigs. And the owner of the pigs was a guy who lived in town or lived locally, who was a road sweeper and worked for the council. And he just wanted to get the pigs off to the slaughterhouse to get his money. But then there was this sort of public outcry. No, these pigs, they're fantastic. Look at the audacity of them. We got to save them from being killed, from being turned into sausages. And so then I think there were sightings of the pigs. The hundreds of journalists were running around in the gardens, in the bushes, trying to follow the pigs. And I think the Daily Mail bought exclusive rights to the pigs. They were like, right, we're going to buy them. We're going to own these pigs. They're ours now. No other journalist can photograph the pigs. And then I think the pigs were caught after about a week. But I imagine that pigs up in the gardens up there might have done quite a lot of sort of destruction. Because I think pigs make a lot of mess. They do a lot of...
They do, yeah. They're
nosing around. Yeah, so I don't know. I don't know how they caught them, but the sort of rumor in the town was that I don't know, one was caught and then the other one couldn't be caught. It was too tough. And they were trying to catch it, and they like fired a dart or something off, I don't know, from a dart gun onto the pig. It bounced off. The pig got away again, and they had to fire a couple more sort of tranquilizing darts. And then apparently the pig was tranquilized and caught. But they weren't sent to the slaughterhouse. The Daily Mail was paid for them to be kept, I don't know where, but kept alive somewhere as a visitor attraction.
Come and see the infamous 2. Oh, that's
exactly.
That's such a beautiful way of ending it, because it would be nothing worse than just being like shipped back over to the abattoir. Like,
yeah,
God, I think the nation would have rioted.
Yeah, that's right. In Australia, they'd have been coming over here. And then I remembered hearing that a lobster had escaped from the local hotel. As if like following in Butch and Sundance's trotters.
Like, right, if they can do it, so can we.
Yeah. And then the lobster was like chased down the high street, but I don't know any more about that.
Yeah, it just sounds like all the animals decided, no, it's our time, we're out here.
Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant.
I think probably flooding is probably the biggest thing that's affected everybody, because we're a town surrounded by rivers. It's this hilltop town, and then there's sort of rivers that circumnavigate the town. And most of the time that's really lovely, because you can do a walk around the bottom of the hill following the rivers. It's very pleasant. Strangely, there's 2 rivers. They're both called the Avon, which apparently just means river in Celtic. So there's the Shurston Avon and the, I don't know, Chippenham Avon. I don't know which one is which, but my dad does. So it's when those rivers flood, it really is very bad. And there's a system of flood wardens that are meant to alert people. But yeah, I think just this year there were big floods, and here we're at the bottom of the hill. And it came up into our garden from the stream, about 10 feet into the garden. For us, it wasn't bad for us. We were lucky because we didn't have anything at the bottom of the garden. About 4 or 5 cars got, I guess they call it totaled, unusable when the water gets into the engine. So I think that's very scary. And there's some houses that get just flooded every year, and they can't get, where Dr. Pickering used to live, you can't get insurance on the house because it's on the water. It's a mill house and it's just on the water, so it just floods each year. And I think in 2012 there was maybe the worst rain that they've had. And we weren't here then, but we saw pictures on the BBC, and it was at the bottom of the high street coming down the hill. There's a road called St John Street, and people were canoeing to get to their houses.
Oh my word!
Yeah. So I think that's the big sort of scary thing that happens.
And is it kind of expected every year? Has it become a thing? So I imagine if you know it's going to come, it doesn't really take the stress away, but there's a feeling of like, right,
preparedness. Yeah, exactly. I think there is, and I think that's this Wiltshire Council system of like triaging the information about when the flooding's going to come to these wardens that are at the different points, and their job is they'll get a call in the middle of the night from the council, and then their job is to call the other houses that are at risk of flooding and wait and bang on the doors of the people to wake them up and say, move your car, you've got to move it now. And I know we came in our van on the day of the floods this year, and we were like, oh, this is fantastic. There's all these car parking spots. Because car parking is the hot topic. We were like, oh, I never had one on St John Street before. Boom, in there. And we went over to see my parents that evening. They were like, oh yeah, did we say 4 cars got totaled on St John Street last night? And then we were like, right, run back over and move the van from there. But I think you're right. People are more prepared now, and there is a system of, which I really don't understand, to do with the weir, like monitoring the weirs in some way. There are people whose job it is to open sluices to let the water flow in different places and divert it from different ways. I don't know if it worked or not, but there's all these rumours. Ray Sanderson's got the keys. That's all I know.
I thought that's almost like a code word. Jess Hardison's got the keys.
Yeah.
What happens to people whose houses are flooded? Do they have to move out to somewhere else? Or?
Yeah, I think people move upstairs is what they say. And what you do is you just, if you know you get flooded every year, you just make sure you've got a stone floor and that you keep everything high enough. You don't have any sockets down low. You keep everything up high, and you have a system that you just put everything up on shelves very quickly, and you can just live upstairs until it goes down.
If your village was a dessert,
Yeah.
what would it be?
Whoa. Well, I was just thinking about the shape first of all, because like I said, it's like a hilltop town, so it's sort of going upwards. So my initial thought was like, well, it's also because I've been really fancying this, where you have like meringue and then cream and then another meringue and cream and then some fruit on top, like an
Eton mess.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but it's not. I mean, the town is grey. The town is really grey stone, so like a grey Eton mess.
Just add some food colouring.
Yeah.
So I thought, if you don't mind me asking, is there anything that you've learned about yourself or about the village since kind of going into lockdown? Anything that you've become aware of?
I guess, yeah, a couple of things I would say. I think one of them is that Malmesbury is the thing I care about most. More than theatre, which is pretty high up there for me, but more than theatre. I was like, I can look after this community in Malmesbury, and I can spend my energy doing that, but I don't really care about theatre in this time of crisis. We don't need it now, but we do need each other, and we do need contact. I guess it sounds really harsh to say that. We definitely need art, but theatre didn't feel like a relevant thing to me because we can't do it now. And so I thought the connection between I guess I was thinking about communities and like which community can you put your energy into? And I think some people might have the energy to put it into the theatre community to keep that sort of spiritually alive when it can't happen. And I thought I'm going to choose to put my energy into the sort of the community of the area. And I guess I realized that in a moment of choice, with time being the limiter, it was the physical community that I chose. So that I think that was my big realization, that's where I wanted to put my energy. I'm slightly resentful about it sometimes when you feel like, oh God, it's so much work or whatever, and trying to take care of lots of people and stuff. But at the same time, I think I'm happy with that choice. I think I would have felt guilty not to be keeping an eye on the people on the street and not to be checking in with lots of people. I hope that there is not a new normal. I hope that there is an old normal, because I think that normal changes every day for everyone, and every second that happens, there is another second, and that changes the normal. So there is a new normal all the time. But I really hope that in the new normal that happens after the lockdown, I'm really looking forward to having a beer in a pub, a big one, but pints, not a little one. Okay.
Not one of those half pints, none of that.
No, big whole one. Yeah.
Malmesbury really is a town bursting with nearly unbelievable stories. Having just made a show about the Witches of Bideford, our ears pricked up when Sidney mentioned the untold story of the Witches of Malmesbury. So who better to tell that story than the man who literally wrote the book on them?
Hi, Tony.
Hi.
Could you just describe where you are right now?
I'm in Malmesbury in Wiltshire, sitting in my study in our house, which is in the old town of Malmesbury. If I stand up, I can see a fantastic view. We look out over the countryside, actually. It's great, this part of Malmesbury. It's still within its medieval boundaries, and we're on the line of the old wall. So we look out over the Wiltshire countryside.
We've kind of noticed that there's been quite an explosion in people talking about local history and witches in particular. I suppose I'm just wondering why you think there may have been a peak in people kind of re-exploring this history.
I don't know quite why that is. There is something about witchcraft that fascinates people. I think there's a greater, I guess, awareness now than there used to be of the gender issues that are behind so many of these stories, and just greater awareness of the way in which women in various ways have been, mistreated historically, and this, it all kind of comes together, doesn't it, in lots of these stories of these poor, marginalized, vulnerable women who are, literally demonized by the rest of society and by the church and the so-called respectable folks. There's something about that story that kind of shocks people today.
So firstly, we wondered if the witches were a well-known piece of history in Malmesbury.
No, until I had a look, there was some vague awareness that there was a witchcraft story associated with Malmesbury, but not much was known about it.
So how was this long-lost story finally uncovered?
A man called James Long had written a book about the event, and I looked that up, and it's, you can look it up on Wikipedia, and it says, oh yes, he wrote a book, but the book has been lost. And I thought, oh, that's a pity. And then I did a Google search of Malmesbury witches, and ridiculously, I found the book.
Oh, brilliant!
I found the lost book.
The author of the book, James Long, was a magistrate who actually interrogated the women before they were sent off to trial in 1672. He wrote about the witch trials, but the book was never published. Until 160 years later, in the 1830s, when a local historian got his hands on a fragment of the book and sent it to be published in a London periodical called the Gentleman's Magazine. Tony continues to share what was discovered from this fragment of James Long's book.
It's reasonable to conclude that his story is an accurate story. But it is a story, it's got a particular narrative, which is partly about him, James Long. So he's the kind of hero of the story. And he turns up in the town. He lived a few miles away. He was a local magistrate. And he was called for to, he comes to the town because the town's in uproar in early 1672. And there are various accusations going on about the relating to the local witches. And when he arrives, he says that 13 or 14 of them had been arrested and they were going to be sent off to Salisbury. And he says it was chaos, but fortunately I was there and I was able to impose order on the chaos and sort things out and ascertain that of the 14, there were only 3, he says, against whom the evidence was really strong. So I ordered that they should be sent off to Salisbury for trial. And he names them. They were Judith Witchell and Anne Tilling and Elizabeth Peacock. And he makes it clear that the leader of the Malmesbury coven, in the eyes of her accusers, was this woman, Elizabeth Peacock.
You stand accused of many wrongs. The court would like to lay them out in the form of a song. Your misdemeanors you can't deny. Throughout the streets of Bideford, you've cast your evil eye. So gather round, townspeople, and solemnly raise your hand. Tell the truth and nothing but as you take to the witness stand.
There was a backstory of decades of resentment on the part of the respectable people of town towards this group of, so-called witches. And that the chief accuser of 1672 was a woman called Mary Webb, who back nearly 30 years earlier had been involved in another witchcraft hysteria. When she was a little girl, she accused a woman of bewitching her father's house. That woman, Goodwife Orchard, was eventually hanged at Salisbury as a result of the testimony of the little girl, and a curse was put upon her by the friends of Goodwife Orchard. And she lives for decades in fear of the witches. By the 1670s, she's a woman in her late 30s. She's got children. She's married to a very prominent local businessman. And they think that the witches are out to get them and out to get their children. So that's the story that James Long tells.
Oh, interesting. So it's almost this paranoia that's kind of followed her through her life.
Yeah, definitely. It's really sad and dark. Amazingly, there is another good source. So there's something called the Jail Book of Salisbury that lists all the charges. The charge sheet is it's quite detailed, and a fourth woman appears called Elizabeth Mills. So there's 4 of these women who are on trial, and they're charged basically with a series of offences, including the bewitching of the children of Mary and Robert Webb, and several of their kids have supposedly been harmed through their black magic. They're accused also of killing some of the horses of a local gentleman called Henry Denning and Elizabeth Peacock. But only Elizabeth is accused of killing and murdering by witchcraft 3 girls. So there's a whole series of charges, but the single most serious charge, I mean, they're all serious, but the only one who's actually accused of having killed anybody is Elizabeth Peacock, and she's accused of killing these 4 girls. And you can track down some of these girls in the burials register, and one of them had died actually 4 or 5 years earlier, and the vicar had written she died suddenly. So obviously this has been going on for years, this simmering antagonism towards Elizabeth Peacock. James Long tells the story of how in 1672 it all kind of explodes because one of them confesses, Anne Tilling confesses, and she accuses everybody else. And Anne's confession Long gives, and he says that Anne Tilling explained that they were organised into a coven of 9 witches, organised into 3 threes, and that they sometimes met all together, all 9 of them, and sometimes they met separately in their threes, and they had 3 or 4 accomplices who helped them, including a couple of blokes. And so there's some interesting detail in his account. So there were these 4 women who were bundled off to Salisbury jail and who waited for the arrival of the assize judges.
Hang her, burn her, she's a curser. Send her down and see if she'll drown. There's no maybe, she has no baby. She's a witch, she's a witch.
By this point, although there was still lots of belief in witchcraft and lots of accusations of witchcraft, but it was very difficult to get a conviction. And that the great majority of women, they were mostly women who were accused of witchcraft after the Restoration of 1660, most of them were found not guilty. And they were found not guilty because the judges kind of refused to accept that the evidence was good enough, and they directed the juries to find them not guilty. And so the execution of the Bideford women and the execution of the Malmesbury women, 2 of them were executed. It was unusual by this stage. There's a kind of assumed narrative that, oh yes, it was all fading out then because, you know, science and modernity and rationality, that was coming along, wasn't it? And that's why it all eventually stopped. And actually it's not like that. The story's just not like that. And my guys, John Aubrey and James Long, were also members of the Royal Society, which still exists today. And, you know, the leading scientists of Britain and the world are invited to become fellows of the Royal Society. So I'm interested in the fact that James Long, who was the persecutor of the Malmesbury witches, was a very active member of the Royal Society. And his booklet, which was never published, but it was intended to show that you could reconcile modern scientific belief with belief in witchcraft. And he wasn't alone in that. Several of his colleagues within the Royal Society saw things in the same way. And the most distinguished of them all was Robert Boyle, who was the top scientist, you know, arguably in the world in this period. And he was the top sort of luminary of the Royal Society, and he believed in witchcraft. He thought that you could reconcile modern science with witchcraft. Some of the folks in New England were clearly, explicitly influenced by reading these books in particular. So there's a direct connection between this scientific justification for witchcraft and the persecution of the women in Salem in 1692. Direct connection.
Oh, that's so interesting, because I definitely was of the opinion that as soon as science was coming in, and that the hysteria and the thoughts around witchcraft would die out, but to know that they kind of coincided with each other, very fascinating.
Yeah, I don't think it's the scientists who end the persecution of witches. I think it's the judges, actually, who in the end say, no, we're not going to tolerate this.
I saw her with a tiny cat.
And this one's got a pointed hat.
She's been frolicking with a bat.
Yes, her cooking's much too rich.
She's got a birthmark, it's really big.
She turned my fingers into twigs.
From the devil's pool, she takes a swig.
Yeah, and she pushed me in a ditch.
She's really ugly,
But kind of hot.
she's a loner.
All those friends she's got.
She rides
And
left-handed.
she reads a lot.
Oh, I get it. She's a witch. Hang her, burn her, she's a curser. Send her down and see if she'll drown. There's no maybe, she has no baby. She's a witch, she's a witch.
For me, the most spine-tingling moment was when I found in the record, I found the will of Elizabeth Peacock. So I didn't explain that the four of them were put on trial, but only two of them were found guilty. And they were Judith Witchell and Anne Tilling. Elizabeth Peacock was found not guilty, and she was the chief suspect. And she came home. She lived for 2 or 3 years and died in 1675, 3 years after the trial. So her sister was executed. This other woman was executed, but she survived, and she's buried in Malmesbury Abbey, and she's entered into the burials register. She had a respectable Christian burial at this sort of epicenter of respectability in the town, the Abbey Church, and she left a will, which I think is like amazing that she left a will and that it survived. So for me, the most exciting moment was that I managed, through looking at catalogues and things, to work out that there was a will of somebody called Elizabeth Peacock. And I went to the records office in Chippenham, and they brought it out of the storeroom and gave it to me. And they wouldn't have done this like 5 years ago, 6 years ago. They wouldn't do that today, because it's all just been digitized, which, quite right, because that, preserves the documents. But this was just before digitization. So they actually gave me this scrappy piece of paper, which I was able to hold in my hand, which Elizabeth Peacock had held, and on which she was illiterate. She put her mark. She's got nothing. She's got some sort of shack and her clothes and a bed. Those are the three things that she leaves. And she leaves her bed to my kinsman, William Witchell, who I think must be the son of her executed sister. And that was just, like spine tingling, holding Elizabeth's will and reading those words. I'm thinking, this is my Elizabeth, because there's the Witchell connection. So that was pretty special.
That's amazing to be able to hold something from all that time ago and know, she wrote that. That's incredible.
I like the idea of Elizabeth's resilience, and that she survived and that she was able to make a will. And this is me being fanciful, but I imagine this as a sort of act of defiance. So I'm leaving a will. This is it's a legal document. It's also a statement of Christian orthodoxy. I leave my soul to God and so on. So she's defying the people who were out to get her, and she's also saying, and you know what? I'm respectable. I'm a lady. I've made a will.
I wondered if there was any kind of acknowledgement of the witches in Malmesbury, of they just kind of...
Well, no, and I think that's quite wrong, actually. I've seen pictures of that plaque in Exeter, and I think it's good to mark these stories and these terrible experiences. And but there's nothing in Malmesbury, and I do occasionally say to people, hey, there should be some sort of memorial to these women, but so far I don't seem to have had much effect.
And I just wondered if you had to leave Malmesbury at the drop of a hat, what would you miss the most?
I mean, obviously, I'd miss the people. It's all about people, isn't it? But as someone who's become obsessed with the history of this place, there is something about it. There's a sense of these countless, generations that you have here. I've always loved very early in the morning in summer, if I was going to work very early for some reason, just being able to walk up the middle of the high street with no cars, just me in the middle of the high street with this sense of the past. And actually, over the last few weeks, I've been able to do that a lot, walk up the middle of the high street. It's quite a good way of social distancing, and just sort of taking in this sense of this place and its 1,000 years backstory.
Well, that's kind of all my questions.
Okay.
So it was so lovely to chat to you, Tony. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
But yeah, go and enjoy the beautiful Malmesbury sunshine.
Yeah, great. All right, really nice to talk to you. Hope the project
so
goes really well.
Thank you.
Okay, all right.
Cheers.
Speak soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Tony is still petitioning for there to be a memorial dedicated to the accused witches in Malmesbury, just like the one in Exeter that he mentions, which is dedicated to the Witches of Bideford. In 2022, it will be the 350th anniversary of the Malmesbury witch trials, so we hope they are commemorated and recognised by then. We checked in with Sidney 6.5 weeks after our chat and heard she had a very lovely birthday and went ahead with the slightly illegal picnic in the garden, as it was only one day before picnics were allowed, and happened to be serenaded by sparrows. We asked her what had changed since we spoke, with which she replied, "What a big question, so much yet nothing at all." To keep up to date with Sidney and her theatre company, The Last Baguette, visit their website at thelastbaguette.com.
You have been listening to Stories from the Sticks by Scratchworks Theatre Company. If you enjoyed listening, please do spread the word. Subscribe, follow and share on social media, or tell all your friends and family on the next Zoom chat or socially distanced occasion. We'd love to share these stories far and wide. Reviews and feedback are also greatly appreciated too. This is our first podcast, so we'd love to hear what you think. We'd like to say a huge thank you to Sidney and Tony for sharing their stories with us, and to Martin and the Pound Arts Centre for all their support. Thank you to Rosie Hood for allowing us to play her song Furlong of Flight. You can find a link in the show notes to more of her music. And of course, thanks to Acast for hosting us.
You can sign up to the Scratchworks mailing list to keep up to date with our news, or find us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. Stories from the Sticks is supported by Arts Council England. It was edited by Andrew Armfield and the music composed by Jack Dean. The original song She's a Witch was written by Scratchworks Theatre and Andrew Armfield, and it's from our latest show, Hags, a Magical Extravaganza. Plus, if you're in need of an afternoon activity, we would like you to creatively respond to the question, if your town or village was a dessert, what would it be? Send us your drawings, paintings, songs, poems, or even a picture of your homemade desserts, and we will be sharing them on our website and social media platforms. Check them out, as we've already had some delicious submissions. Episode 4 of Stories from the Sticks will be on its way very soon.